Well, my friends, Ray over at CigarClimatology. I'm over here at the workbench. This is my soldering station, or at least it is currently. And I'm setting up a control center for a customer, and I try to build a couple of these at a time because it's pretty time consuming. So one thing is a quick note. You'll notice you see a lot of wiring going on here. This is all done for you prior to receiving the kit. What you guys end up doing actually is hooking up some of these pigtails to the wires that will come in and out of the cooler. That obviously I can't do for you because you need the cooler and you need to have those looms open and essentially, just bare wire to run them from the interior to the exterior of the cooler. This is an item that mounts on the back of the cooler on the exterior. But I wanted to take a couple of minutes and just talk about a couple of best practices here. Now, when I wire every single one of these terminals, just to give you a demonstration here, let's just pull one out. Each one of these wires has been tinned by me. So you can actually see the solder here at the end of the wire. Now, you don't have to do this, but I think it's pretty important because these are all stranded wires, and if one of the little wires goes awry, you can essentially, get a short circuit or something like that. So we don't really want to do that. So I'm going to just take you through that process real quick. Now, again, it's not a must that you have a soldering iron, but I do suggest it. I do think it's a good idea to tin the wires, and so we're going to do a quick little demo on that. So let's look down here. Since I only have two hands, I set up a couple of stations here for my tinning of wires, but you have to understand that what I do is I go about and I do this really, really quickly. So the first thing, even though this one's cut already, the first thing we do here is we grab whatever wire that we're going to tin, and let's just say that it wasn't stripped, so I just cut that off. So we do strip it to length, and typically anything that's going to go into one of these terminal blocks over here, I'll show you that in a second, is going to get trimmed down or stripped out to about a 1/4 of an inch. Okay, so that's your guide. And if you strip it a little bit more and you tin it and it's too long, you can always cut it off without retinning it. So if worse comes to worse, strip it a little on the long side, tin it, and then cut it to length, because you cutting the tinning and the wire at the same time won't hurt anything. So the next, you grab your solder and your soldering iron. Just cleaning off my tip here real quick, and letting my soldering iron come up to temperature. And what you do is you place the soldering iron here against the wire to be tinned, and you heat it up. I get a little solder on the iron itself so that I can get the flux flowing, and you simply flow the solder onto the wire as such. I clean off the tip of the soldering iron, put it away, and we're done. So there's your tinned wire. So I'm going to zoom back out here a little bit more, and we're going to talk real quick just about what it takes when you mount these wires in one of the terminal blocks. So let me move the camera over here just a wee bit. This is a red wire. We're going to be working on these red terminals. Now, if you can see down here in the side, grab my screwdriver, the wires actually go into these ports here. Okay, so here's a port here for the green, and you can see that these have already been wired in this section. So you can see, if you can, that there is actually a metal jaw inside this terminal block, and that's controlled by this little screw right here on the top. So just so you have a little bit of an understanding about these terminal blocks, the ones that are nested together like this, these are called shorted together, or they have what's called a shorting bar, or a continuity bar, which I've already installed for you. You can see that there's 3 screws in here. So you don't need to get these too tight. I will have already installed these, but when we get this, when you unpack it, you might want to go through and make sure that these have been snugged up. So anyway, what you would do is you would tin your wire like the example that I just gave, and then you'd make sure that the screw is open, or that the terminal is open here, and then you go ahead and just tighten this thing down clockwise like so until it grabs the wire. Now, because these are thin terminals, sometimes you can see when you tighten it that it pushes the terminal apart slightly. That's actually no big deal, but many times I'll snug it down a little bit, and then when it comes to tighten it, I'll actually grab the block side to side like this, compress it a little bit to hold the terminals together. Now you'll note that this wire is fairly rigid. Now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to run this over into one of the relays, back over here. And I don't know that it's really necessary that you watch me do that, but so if we were to do this again, we trim our wire, we then strip our wire, and these particular DIN relays here are not very deep, so I know just from experience that I don't have to strip too much wire. It's just holding its own. I don't need to clamp it, and I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to tin this bad boy too. Now if you see that you got a lump there, you have to go in and maybe wipe off a little bit of the solder with the end of your soldering iron. Okay, and then this would go into the common, which is right here. So we go ahead and insert that guy, and keep in mind if they're too hot. I usually do this pretty quickly, but if they're too hot, you don't really want to go sticking them in there, because you obviously don't want to melt any aspect of the relay or any one of the terminals. But they cool down pretty quickly. And so same thing here, we just snug that down, and that's a done deal. So I wanted to demonstrate that to you. I will probably come back and recut this, make it a little bit shorter so that it tends to line up with these guys, and trim it again. But that's the gist on how to deal with the DIN terminals and the DIN relays. Again, none of this major wiring will need to be done by you, but I do, since you are going to have to make some hookups like these guys here and like this guy down here, I want to make sure that you understand how this stuff works, and it just requires kind of a tiny straight slot screwdriver. So that's it. That's about all that there is to it as far as dealing with any soldering that you need to do.